Whoa,
Hey guys,
hello.
How you doing?
thanks for joining us. So good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Cool.
Thank you so much. Hello.
We are Movie Schmovie. We're really happy to have you on the show. We're big fans of searching, and so we're excited to talk to you about Run. But we figured we'd start the conversation a little bit just because looking at this new film and seeing your relatively short feature careers, we wanted to talk to you guys at first about going from searching coming out, being the success that it was. Can you talk a little bit about both of you? The transition from that film coming out, you guys starting pre-production on Run, and what changed, or the differences, the similarities between a film, that comes out and finds a great audience, and people were really talking about searching a lot a couple years ago, and just kind of how that differed with Run, and as a second effort for a feature, for I guess specifically for you, Aneesh, what was different? What did you learn from your experience on searching, and how was that applied to make Run different in some ways and similar in the others?
Huge question. Okay. So
we start big. We start real big.
Okay, so searching was really unique in the sense that I was 23 when I was making it, I was 25 when I was making it, and I had just come from making a bunch of commercials at Google, and I had made a bunch of stuff that took place on screens or that use technology or apps to tell the story. And so jumping to searching felt weirdly like I was uniquely capable of doing this, even though it felt like everybody else had to relearn their jobs in a new way. Like I knew what we were doing, kind of a deal. Mm-hmm. And then jumping to this, it was the opposite. Suddenly I was making a feature film, a normal live action movie for the first time, and everybody around me had done this many, many times before, and I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
And so much about the early process of this film, of making Run, especially on set, was me just tiptoeing around being okay, how does this work? What is rehearsal? What is pre-lighting? All these terms that I was just learning for the first time, and then having to play cool on the cover and be yeah, of course, I know what that is. And it's sort of that learning curve. It was very similar to, actually, I think Kira, who was the first time actor, sort of starting off never having acted, and then by day 30 just on it, and I think it was a very similar arc coming out of this, where it's this was in a lot of ways my first live action movie, and I learned how to make a movie in this process, which was practically the objective of why this was the movie we tried to make in the first place, so that I could do this. So that was the experience for me, but I'm sure Nat has a different take.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think specifically with this team too, going from searching, which we made, it felt like it was just us and our buddies from USC, making this thing that no one really understood what we were making, but we kind of did. And then it turned out okay. So it was okay, cool. This felt like a lot more pressure from the onset, because we went out with the project and we were lucky enough to have a lot of people interested. And, we ended up going with Lionsgate, and, they're a studio, and there's a lot of pressure, I think, that comes with that. And in addition to the pressure, it was also the first time outside of me, Sev, and Aneesh, that we had to deal with this other entity that also has creative thoughts and input and power and all those things. So it was us kind of finding our groove in this new dynamic. And then on top of all that, we shot the movie in Winnipeg, and we're all from California, and it was winter. It was very cold.
Yeah.
We didn't have all the crew that we usually use in LA, so it was meeting a lot of new people, and yeah, it was a challenge for sure. And that shift there was a big learning curve for sure for all of us.
I had a question, Aneesh. So I had the pleasure of watching your short Microeconomics, which had Thomas Babushka.
Oh my gosh, you watched Microeconomics, dude?
Yes.
So condolences. Okay.
I'm seeing some connective tissue, right? So hear me out. Thomas Babushka, Sarah Song in Searching, and Kira Allen. And these are all newcomers, and you bring these amazing performances out of these newcoming actors. How do you channel the energy? How does it work? Let me know your process.
Man, I wish there was this grand vision of like plucking people out of nowhere and doing this. So to give you some context, the answer to all of them is just pure like necessity. But like for microeconomics, which is the most insane deep cut like I've ever been thrown. So in microeconomics, like I was a senior in college, and that was like the film that I made freshman year or the first semester. And like we had $8,000 to make that whole movie. So for sure, the person we're casting is an unknown, like for sure. Like Thomas we just happened to pick someone really well and really talented enough that like eventually he had a career of his own, and then had to bring him back into Searching as like a brief little cameo. Sarah Sohn was, a person who walked into the room during Searching auditions and basically like blew us away just by like her presence. And we were just like, okay, we'll put you in the movie, no big deal. And then we'll put you back in in Run, and then Kira Allen Kira Allen. Yeah, now it's the trend. We got to put Kira in something else. But like Kira was somebody who like, we knew that we wanted to cast somebody who was disabled in real life. When we wrote the role, it just sort of like a no-brainer to us. Even despite the fact that we had like Disney stars and famous people who've been in like big movies, who we could have worked with pretty easily. It was just like had to be someone who had a disability in real life, and like that person is an unknown. Like she doesn't exist in our current Hollywood structure, and so like we had to go find her, and that was an extensive hunt. So like in a way, like. And necessity has been like the answer to all of these things. I like it, but at the same time, like, I don't know, like one day do I want to make a movie with Leo and Brad? Sure, but so far it's worked out.
That's incredible, man.
One of the things that stood out to me about Run was the fact that you take the sort of genre references that we might be thinking of and you head them off at the pass. Like when she calls directory assistants, there's actually a voice that mentions Derry, Maine as an example of a city and a state. I wondered if I actually thought that kind of sounds like it might be the director's voice or somebody on that's just the kind of fun thing. But anyway, well, that was a great touch, but it made me realize that you knew what I was beginning to think, which was, hey, this is kind of like Misery, or, at other moments, hey, this is kind of like Rear Window. And I thought it was really, I don't know, a very cleverly constructed movie that it starts off, there's not much mystery from the beginning of the movie of the sort of trouble that Chloe, the lead character played by Kira Allen, is in, but the suspense and the tension, the kind of gamesmanship between the two of them. It did seem to me like you were doing something kind of new in terms of examining a mother-daughter relationship, or quote unquote mother-daughter relationship, but also you were making us think of these genre films that we know and love. So I guess I'm just wondering, how much are those genre influences that affect your filmmaking altogether, or was it just for this project? And what was it like kind of juggling that, trying to make your own new thing, but also, paying a bit of homage?
That's a good question. M. Night Shyamalan, his movie, when I was a kid, to see another Indian filmmaker making movies, like he could have been making comedies. I feel like I would have been making comedies today. I think so a lot of his films like seriously inspired me to make films, and I think like he was inspired by Alfred Hitchcock a lot, so I naturally moved to Hitchcock and sort of started watching all these movies. And the objective for Run was always to do the opposite of Searching. I needed to prove to myself that I could make a movie like that, because Searching was it was a gimmick that worked, but it was a gimmick and it was complex and all these things, and I wanted to do the opposite. And so I wanted to make something that was opposite to Searching, and that was very kind of old school classic Hitchcockian movie that doesn't rely on a lot. It's just two characters in one house, and like the thrills are not coming from whose throat is gonna get cut, but rather like, is a character gonna find out they've been using 411, and the other person to keep it a secret from them. So those references, we put it out throughout the film, and you're citing the exact references. It's basically, this movie is Misery, this movie is Rear Window, this movie is Psycho, this movie is Misery. This movie is Rear Window, this movie is Psycho, this movie is Misery, and this movie is basically What Happened to Baby Jane, and a little of Shadow of a Doubt. And I think like those references are throughout the movie, like character names are named after like characters from Misery, or actors from, like I mean, for example, like the pharmacist, you know, on the phone, she's Mrs. Bates. And then on her tagline, it's Kathy, you know, like, I think there's just so many obvious things like that. The movie was always supposed to be an emulation and like an homage to those movies that got me into filmmaking. It's just doing it on a very bare bones level.
And it really was like the language that like Aneesh spoke with like all the department heads. Like I remember when we first got to Winnipeg, he was referencing these movies constantly, and someone came up with the idea of like, let's just have like a library in the production office, and like people could check out DVDs, and then on Fridays, like whoever wanted to hang back in the production office, you know, we'd put a movie on all together and watch it. And like very quickly, like I remember our production designer would be like, they'd be talking in a corner, Aneesh and him, and he'd be like, I get it now. It's Hitchcock. It's Shyamalan. I get it. And like, very much throughout the whole shoot, like we were all referencing that and watching, and it was very much in everyone's like minds the whole time throughout the process.
That's pretty incredible. So something I noticed about just the relationship between, I guess, Run and Searching and the suspense that you create. You know, suspense is done pretty often in movies. There's something very intentional about time and space that you do a lot in this movie. When did you develop that skill set to kind of, you know, there's a tight relationship between suspense and space and time that you really get right in these films. What is it about that you kind of realized was key to making the suspense movie suspenseful?
The edit, you know, I don't know. It's like, it's the, I don't know, like to me, I grew up on like, if things were too violent, my parents would make us close our eyes. If like if characters were kissing, we'd have to close our eyes when we were young, you know, like, so like, I always I love the movies that I was able to watch, you know, like fully without having to do this. So I think like those movies have those movies that left it or past that like eye closing test were those Hitchcock movies, and those movies taught me how to play with time, you know, where it's just like that you show, like the obvious answer is you show the bomb under the table, and then then you have a conversation, and the whole time you're wondering when the bomb's going off, you know. And I think like that level of like just quiet, like this is so much fun, and like I don't know. And that's one of my favorite scenes in the current cut of the final cut of Run is that like the phone call scene. Like the tension is just like character wheels over to the window to look at her mom while she's gardening, goes back to the phone, back to the window, back to the phone, back to the window, character's gone. Now we're cut to a wide where like we see her door shot, like, and she's looking back there. That's a fucking classic, dude. Like I love that stuff. You know,
it's
like
so good, man.
that like and that's what we wanted to build a movie off of. We wanted to make a movie that was like first half a movie that I would be allowed to keep my eyes open, and then second half a movie that I would allow those to be told.
You're like, oh, I can watch this now.
That's incredible.
Well, we're kind of tiptoeing up to one of the things that's really, really noteworthy about this movie, which is the sense of menace that Sarah Paulson brings to her role. I mean, she's so great, and she just so perfectly modulates that level of like, in the beginning, their relationship is a little bit more easy, and she becomes more villainous as the movie goes along. Well, what was it like crafting a performance with someone like that, especially with, you know, on one end of the cast, you have a veteran like Sarah Paulson, and even in smaller roles, someone like Pat Healy showing up, and he always brings who knows what's going to happen quality to any movie that he's in. And I love it when he swerves and plays a nice guy, like in this movie. But what was it like kind of juggling that, you know, just that between someone like Sarah Paulson and someone like Kiera Allen, who acquits herself incredibly in this movie, but you know, she's no veteran, and they're both kind of asked to face off in a convincing way. Working with the actors, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. You know, it's very different. It almost felt schizophrenic to me, you know, like we're like in the same scene where these two people are having dialogue, like the content and the quantity and the type of words that I'm telling each of them between takes are like black and white. It is so opposite from each other, like of how I would talk to each one of them, you know, like Sarah, like you said, is a veteran, you know, like we know that she's an excellent actor. We know that she plays incredible roles with so much nuance. So in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm just going to give her all the backstory, all the material that she needs. And then I'm going to watch her basically, this is my bet, that I'm going to watch her soak it in and spit out fire. And like, I wrote this like 15-page booklet, 10-point font with her entire backstory, her entire life, all her like just everything in her life up until the moment the story starts. Every story about these like books in her house, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And like,
Wow.
Our rehearsals would be spent going over that, you know? And by the time that she got onto set, it was right. The bet paid off. She soaked it all in and she was spitting fire take after take. Kira, on the other hand, was different. As a total novice, I thought to myself, like, I think like I can't tell her who this character is. She has to own it herself. So I made her write that booklet for herself. And like what came out was this like 15-page, 10-point font, like really well-written book of her own life. And she owned it, you know? And I would basically challenge her on what she wrote and be like, that doesn't work with our story, rewrite that, or tell me how you got that object in the house or that object in the house. And then before set each day, we would go through the set and I would ask her I would point out random objects in her room and be like, why is that there? And then, you know, she'd be like, well, because the PD people place it there or like whatever. But like be like, okay, why is that there? And then she'd say, this is why it's there. This is when I built it, whatever. So to give herself that sense of ownership over everything, I feel like was the bet that we were placing in her. And because of that, I think, which paid off clearly in her performance, like a lot of the comments and the questions and the things that she said on set were so astute and so much like past chapter 1, past chapter 2 of getting into this character. There were like deep questions. I would often just be like, damn, I don't even know the answer to that. And yeah, she's amazing in this movie. We're both so lucky to be able to watch this star get risen, you know, out of absolutely nowhere.
She's so smart, and she's a writer as well. And I remember when we read the backstory that she wrote, I remember like one key thing, we were all like, wow, like she and you remember the beat. I don't want to, it's spoilery. I don't know if you guys are doing spoilers.
Yeah.
It's super spoilery. And like, I remember we all got goosebumps, and just like, it was so well written, and the beats she was coming up with in her own backstory were just like insane.
Yeah. It's like, maybe we should make that movie.
Right.
Do you mind telling us what the beat was? Because we can always edit around any spoilers for this segment, but I'm curious.
So she wrote about like being a young kid and having a memory of herself walking. Like she's like on the stairs, and it was very vivid. It was better than, I don't remember the deal, but she was like on the stairs, and she has a memory of seeing her mom. She's walking up the stairs and she's seeing her mom like carrying the laundry basket. And it was like, holy shit, like her character having a memory that she could actually walk, and it was in such vivid detail. Literally, like, it gave me goosebumps. It was insane.
Wow. I wanted to ask you guys, so talking about this mother-daughter relationship in Run, looking back at Searching, it's this, the arc of the story is really this father-daughter, and a father who doesn't know his daughter and a daughter who doesn't know her mother this go round. So I kind of wondering, like, what's the approach to this storytelling? Like, what attracts you to these familiar relationships? I mean, I know
how messed up was your family?
Yeah. Tell us more about your family life. They didn't let you watch movies, I understand, but what else?
Yeah, I hated
but
yeah.
But like, you know, what is the attraction there? Because I mean, that is super relatable, and like, you always wonder, is there more to my relationship with person X? But I mean, these family relationships are so anchored in trust and things like that. So what pulls you to that, and why do you think that works so well for these stories that you decide to tell?
That's tough, because it's never a conscious choice to be like, you know what, we're going to make a story this time about parents and kids. You know, it always just comes out like very naturally in the writing. And I think Nat, Sev, myself, we come from very like sort of like tight-knit families, you know, from a cultural standpoint. And so I think that naturally has fed into some sort of like authenticity, that we feel like we're saying something like capital T true in the sense of the word. In the spirit of making the anti-Searching, I think this had to be the dark side of that relationship. You know, like we've always made stuff about how positive the love is between a parent and a kid, and here we were asking the question of like, can you love a kid so much that you stop hugging them and start smothering them? And like that to us, in a lot of ways, like what I like about these films, even though because they're so vastly different, is they become these like parallel pieces in some weird little way that like are related to each other and talking to each other, just not at all similar in their executions.
we have pretty, I mean, we have functional families. I mean, everyone has a little bit of dysfunction, but like, it's actually kind of crazy too on this movie. There was a little bit of like life imitating art because Aneesh got like super sick.
Oh yeah.
Before we started shooting, he was doing press for Searching. So he was like going all around the world. He got this like crazy stomach bug. And like, we had to be in Winnipeg, like right after he like got diagnosed and figured out what was wrong. And he had to be on this crazy diet. But like when you're prepping and shooting, you don't really have a choice in what you're eating.
For 4 months.
For 4 months.
Oh my
His
God.
mom flew out and like came to Winnipeg and stayed with him and like cooked every meal for him. It was
prep and production. Every single, I didn't have, to this day, I never had a single meal of Crafty. Like every single thing my mom made. So that I mean, eventually got better, but like it was just some weird bug that we had while traveling. I was traveling so much that my stomach just kept messing it up again. So like we had to like reset this thing, and it was all from this diet that I didn't have any time to make, like Natalie was saying. And it just felt very ironic and fitting and sad and funny that we were making a movie about a mom taking care of her daughter. And during it, the director literally had his mom fly over to help him get over a sickness. So it was oddly fitting.
I do feel like all the crew was like, what's going on here? Like, so we have just mom, like, is she chill? Is she like Diane? And she's good.
Wow.
Well, Aneesh, Natalie, thank you so much for your time. Run premieres on Hulu November 20th. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We can't wait.
Yes, congratulations on the film.
Thank you guys.
Thank you
Thanks
guys.
so much.
Yeah, I really
That's an
appreciate it.
awesome question.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.